Hastings Planning Board working session, April 5th, 2017. We'll just go around the table to introduce ourselves for the record.
Kathy Salantis, Planning Board Attorney.
David Stolman, Town Planner.
Jim Macinas, Board Member.
Garen Thompson, Planning Board Member.
Jim Watson, Chair.
Mark Oakwood, Planning Board Member.
Sandy Murray, Secretary.
Nancy Garcia, Consulting Engineer to the Planning Board.
Thank you. I notice that the first item on the agenda is the River Knoll Multifamily Development, 40 Croton Dam Road, rezone and site plan, DEIS review. We have at least two items that we just managed to receive dealing with this. Who do we wish to speak first on this matter?
We ask if they have anything they want to say. The applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is William Knoll, I'm a member from Cutting Affairs. I'm here with Glenn Betchermile, who's the principal of Glenco.
Maybe we give him a microphone. We'll take one of these.
Can the audience hear him?
No, no.
No, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. So, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is William Knoll. I'm a partner of the firm of Cutting Affairs. We're the attorneys for the applicant. I'm here with Glenn Betchermile, who is a principal of Glenco, and with Nanette Bourne at KRF in connection with the application. We had the benefit of reviewing the comment letters that were prepared by Kathy Salantis and David Stolman. Do you want us to address those, or do you want them to go and would you talk to you about, and I wasn't sure how you wanted us to proceed?
I would say if you have any questions or comments about the comments, I didn't expect you to be so up to speed, but if you have any questions or comments about the comments,
I have
we can entertain
questions
them.
and comments about the comments and questions.
All right, well, in that case, unless we go through it first, the audience is not going to be able to understand what we're talking about.
It's pretty technical. I think it would take a while to go through the comments item by item by item. The memos are on file with Sandy. Anybody can get a copy of the memos. But mine, for example, is 14 pages, single spaced. I don't know if you want to go through that item by item or not.
No, we don't necessarily need it. Have they been already loaded up on the website?
Yes.
Right.
So I think we can just summarize that the memos are basically requiring additional information, and they're concluding that the DEIS is not complete yet, and additional work has to be done by the applicant to satisfy and be responsive to the scope that this board prepared.
So we have several questions about that, and I think Annette and I will tag team on it if we can. But questions relate to a few of the comments. One of them touched upon it in Kathy's memo about whether the comparison should be made with the Stony Lodge Hospital when it was up and operating, or rather in its current condition. And my experience has been that you compare the replacement use with what was last operating, and that's an appropriate measure of comparative impacts. There also is one of the alternatives that you were asked to consider is the hospital operating again. So you kind of come back full circle to that comparison in any event. I also wanted to note that we apologize for not having been included in the sets that were submitted to you, but we have full-size plans of the alternatives. They've not been engineered fully, they've not been designed fully, but that was our understanding in the discussion with the board, that the requirement was to lay it out and to then be able to describe it, but not to be required to do full in-depth design analysis for it.
That was our understanding, that you would at least, however, provide sufficient enough for the board to be able to.
We have the full-size plans. We apologize for not having gotten them to you. We understand that we're going to need to revise and resubmit, But I just wanted to note that for the public record that we have one.
Do you have an electronic copy for?
We'll be able to submit that as well. Right?
Yes, we were unaware that they hadn't been included in the document until we got Mr. Stallman's comments. So those should have been added to the alternatives chapter.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Pardon?
I'm sorry, I heard my name.
So-
Whatever you said associated with that was good, but I didn't hear it.
No, your astute eyes and you identified that these were missing and they should have been included. So they were done. There's just an interpretation of that and the copy. So we provided 8 sets and we will provide electronic copies for each.
We will prepare, have a phase 1 prepared, a new phase 1 prepared for, as you requested. I don't know if there are other meaningful comments you want to address.
There are some comments that I have questions, just for you to clarify.
Sure. But could we go back to your comment first, Bill? I don't think that Kathy and I necessarily agree with only analyzing the hospital in full operation versus the proposed project. It's effectively a vacant site now, and there is no use for that property. There hasn't been a use for that property in many years.
Well, I've done some of this also, as I know you have, but the comparisons that I've been, on the projects that I've been handling have consistently compared up and operating use as it existed with current proposal as a comparison. If you're telling us we should deal with the vacant site as a comparison, then there's no comparison. There's no baseline to address. So I don't understand that kind of comment that we should deal with it as a vacant and unused. That would generate no traffic, it would generate no impacts of any kind at all.
Right, correct.
So that's not a baseline.
I would think a good compromise might be to do it both ways, but to compare the proposal against something that doesn't exist and may never exist again doesn't really make much sense to me, nor to Kathy.
Well, that wasn't our understanding from the scope initially, and I don't know
I'm sorry.
how you do a comparison to nothing. You're just talking about, there's got to be some baseline that you're comparing, some use of the site that you're comparing to, for it to have substantive meaning in a comparison. If you're just saying, it's not as if it was never developed, never used. There were impacts to the neighborhood by being up and running. One of the alternatives that we were asked to compare is the hospital reoccupied and running. So
Right,
you'll have-
so as an alternative, that's fine. If you're doing that comparison for the purpose of the alternatives, that's fine. But I think maybe we're talking about the same thing. The traffic analysis that was done for the proposal.
So importantly, and it's an important point, that what are the comparisons that you look at when you use that as a baseline? When we're dealing with traffic impacts, we're taking the existing traffic, the current existing traffic, and we're talking about what the impacts would be to use. So you're having it in the way that you're describing it as a baseline situation. But when you're talking about the buildings and the usage for water, you're talking about drainage and everything else, it's an existing building, and if it was up and operating, that's, to me, is a meaningful baseline.
The only time,
Can I make a recommendation?
can I just say one last thing? The only time you're doing the comparison is when you're looking at the alternatives, correct? I mean, in the body of the document, when you've got the traffic analysis, and the traffic analysis says whatever it says about the project, you're not in that section comparing it to the hospital's traffic. It's really in the alternative section where you're saying use of the property as a hospital would have this kind of traffic impact compared to the project.
I think you typically use a delta for the increased traffic as against what the use on the site was. When you're actually evaluating the traffic, the functionality of the intersection, you're dealing with the traffic to be generated by the site at the existing intersection conditions.
That's true, when you're,
But you do use a delta, comparing it with, like if I had a retail use, as I did in a project recently, and the mall was not fully occupied, we compared it with fully occupied mall as against the alternative use of the building was taken down. And that's pretty typical. When we evaluated, every project that I dealt with in the EIS, we evaluated that use that's on the site, if it wasn't a vacant piece of land, with a delta as against what that use had been and what we're doing. As I said, you still deal with how the intersections will function. You still deal with the capacity of the sewer and the water, and you deal with that in real-time terms as far as that use in those facilities. So you get the measure as if it's zero. You're not taking your credit for it.
I have a thought. It's almost 18 acres. Right now, it's a vacant lot. It once was a hospital. It's no longer, it hasn't been for X amount of years. So, the current zoning, I don't know if it's R15 or R5, whatever it is, whatever the regular, what it is right now. If it's R15, I'm just doing hypothetical. And it says that you can have 20 houses on it. Do that as your base comparison. It's a zone for something right now. You can have X amount of houses on it. We want to go from 20 houses to 188. Let that be the comparison.
We
Because
actually,
it's still a residential neighborhood, it's a residential neighborhood, but
we do that as an alternative comparison. That is part of what the analysis is.
because to go back to a hospital and all the stuff of how many trucks were there and how many patients came and went, all that stuff was hearsay to us.
Well, it's documented, it's not hearsay, with due respect, it's documented, and it's a comparison as to what the use had been if the site was operating.
Is there any downside to just reflecting that currently it's vacant, but when it was used as a hospital, the impacts were this, and that's the more, in your opinion, should be the baseline, but just reflecting that it is currently vacant now.
I'm trying to understand where you're going with this, and if you can explain where you want this now. We've, in the alternative section, we have done exactly what you talked about, and we have included an analysis of the existing hospital. We've shown the comparison of the impacts to all the 14 alternatives that you requested. So that's in the alternative section. In the traffic, there's a slightly different methodology. And so how we deal with a hospital.
My reference was specifically to the executive summary, so maybe that section just has to be looked at and reworked. I mean, I'm not making a global comment, it's that there were specific references in the executive section.
We're fine with that.
That's good. Thank you.
as long as, and I don't have the traffic appendix here, it's just on the disc at this point, but as long as under the no-build condition, does that term,
There should be a
is it-
There's another.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that
As
you
long
are
as the-
essentially.
as long as the levels of service are there, under the no-build condition, we can compare that to the build condition.
We're fine with clarifying the current operating condition or lack of operating condition in the executive summary. And the key point, as we all know, of environmental impact statement is disclosure and analysis. So the comparisons give some perspective, and then we just have to make it clear what the current operation will do that.
But
Yeah,
while
I
we're
think-
on that subject, and maybe I have a question related to, on page 10 of David's memo.
Mhm.
Let me see. 4.
Mhm.
If this is what you're referring to, maybe if you could explain, I didn't quite understand where you were going with that comment.
The first part of it, an analysis was not provided when the hospital was in operation to a build condition with proposed action. Is that in there?
Well, that's what I thought we were just talking about not doing, that I wanted to do. So we just want to make sure we understand what you mean. Is that,
That's what you wanted to do.
well, we wanted to be able to say that when it was operating, we're comparing it to a built condition.
Right, and is that in there?
Yes.
Our understanding is it is.
So we may be wrong that we're still looking for it.
Okay, it's
Okay.
in there.
Okay, so I'm gonna mark down that you're saying it's in there. We'll look a little harder.
And we'll make sure it's clear that it's.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll look harder.
Anything else? You want to comment on?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. With the SHPO material that was submitted to SHPO, the original one was submitted, where they asked for the additional research, which we did, and that has been submitted to them. We have not gotten a response back. So we pursue that.
Great.
Yeah, we were just asking whether it had been done.
Okay, good.
And we'll state that it has been done, and hopefully we'll get a response from it.
To put into the
Right.
accepted DEIS.
Right.
With regards to the maintenance plan, and this should be addressed to include Mr. Vetmire, at this level of the DES, I don't know what you're looking for in terms of a separate document for maintenance and ownership, other than it's going to be in common ownership. Do you want to, it's a little premature to be looking for a draft.
Are you looking for a general description that the property will be landscaping and everything else will be maintained? It's a
Mhm.
rental property.
Mhm.
So typically in a rental property, it's under one management.
Right, we're not looking for the terms of the agreement itself.
So you're just looking for us to be descriptive in
Yes.
in how landscaping and roads and everything else will be maintained?
Exactly,
We
yes.
can do that.
With regards to the character of the neighborhood, business sections, I try not to describe the character of the neighborhood that surrounds it beyond just it's 1- and 2-family homes. You wanted a more expansive description?
Can you point me to the section? Give you under visual impact or
Yeah.
community character? So it's probably on page 7 or 8.
Yes, on page 7, number 30. My experience is that the neighborhood tends not to appreciate having pictures of their homes and descriptions of their homes.
Well, I think you can take a picture, I mean, I imagine if you took a picture straight on somebody's home so you can see the number and identify which home it is, but I think you can probably take a photograph that is representative without really being,
If we did aerial photos, is that acceptable? And then describe it, just like put in Google Earth sort of thing and describe it so that you can see general layout of the neighborhood? Or do you want something more particular to the style of the homes themselves?
I was thinking, the planning board can weigh in, but I was thinking about, sort of a shot down the street where you can see the homes.
It's hard to do.
It's hard to do that, and it becomes very subjective. We can do it.
So-
Really just
so-
looking to find out what you want.
So let me pose the question to the planning board. We're trying to document the character of the surrounding neighborhood photographically, visually.
Well, putting aside the fact that Google allows you to go down the street, does Google Map have the street actually imaged?
I think it's hard, I believe it's hard to actually reproduce the street view, but I mean, we could have photographs taken on it at any number of different points in the neighborhood. If you want to identify where you want us to take pictures, we can do that. We can do an aerial view that just gives a sense of the layout in general. You know, when you look from the air, you can tell pretty much whether it's single family or multi-family or the uses, so we can do that. It depends.
But it's a little hard to get.
Where would you like us to end up with this in, it's a mixed 1 and 2 family with small houses and some large houses. I don't know where we go.
I think we're just trying to get a sense of what the surrounding neighborhood looks like compared to what this project will look and be like. Some representative pictures.
We'll give you neighborhood shots. I mean, when you say what it looks like, you're meaning from public right-of-ways? What it looks like? Because
Yeah,
when we show,
yeah.
right, because when we show what our project would look like from a public right-of-way, you know, visibility is a question of how it's screened.
Right, sure,
We can-
Okay.
sure.
On page,
And preferably you have to scale the same way as you give your presentation, so that you can actually get a direct comparison rather than.
What we've done in other instances, as in a lot of those, is you actually tell what kind of a lens you're using and what approximately what the distance is. But if you're at the road, it's not going to look necessarily the same size because you're at the road, and then it depends how far away the building is. So if you're 250 feet from
Well, I
the
understand
building,
that,
right?
I understand that's gonna happen, but I assume when you do create a presentation of an image, you can adjust for that, whichever you're offering as indication of what your project's gonna look like.
Right, but it wouldn't show you what it looks like from the road if you're going to zoom it in to show more detail of the building, which is why I was asking about where you want the photos to be.
we can add more
We'll do what
character.
we can.
So on page 8, the application of the proposed zoning to other areas of the town.
Mhm, yeah,
How would you like us to deal with that?
the way you normally would.
Do you want us to,
If you're creating a new zone, it could be applicable, town board could use it elsewhere. We have to account for that. So,
So on sites large enough now or sites that might be assembled? Because if you deal with sites that might be assembled, you can get any number of places.
right,
So
So-
what's your preference on that?
I would think you'd have to look and see what exists out there in terms of undeveloped and underdeveloped property.
Qualifying property now as compared to assembly.
Well, if you've got several vacant parcels that butt each other to make a large enough parcel, that might be something that you look into.
would it be possible for us to have an offline discussion and
Absolutely,
come up with some representative?
That's fine.
yes.
Obviously, with emergency service operators, it's not just us, I mean, it's every other place that we try to get letters.
Mhm.
We do the best we can, and short of saying they weren't responsive, we say we have reached out to them and we continue to reach out to them.
Do you ever put any cash in the envelope? I'm not talking about just to get a response.
I'm not sure what the question is.
I didn't, that was not a broad question, if you ever put cash in an envelope. Now,
I don't even know how to address that.
I wish I could take,
The answer is no.
I wish I could take that back.
I'm fine not answering that question. I never deal with cash in an envelope.
That's a good answer, very good answer. Sorry.
We will continue to attempt.
There was one question that Bill had.
That wasn't one of your written comments, was it?
No, no.
I had a question on specificity, Bill, of the
Oh, the
plans
alternatives.
for the alternatives, and whether they have to be to the level of engineering
Right,
drawings,
because,
and I think it's not the board's requirement for that. They're just looking for enough detail so they can analyze, the different alternatives.
okay, well, kind of,
Sketch drawing.
Schematic plans are
Schematic.
fine.
so now that we've belatedly gotten into the plans, we'll get you digital version as well. When we have the offline discussion about where we should apply this MF2 district and analyze it, you can also see if these plans meet what you had asked for, if there's something else that more that you might need.
Yeah, without addressing the, the merit, the substance of these plans, these are fine.
It's good. I wish they had a bit of a document.
Mhm. Better late than never.
Yeah.
All's well that ends well.
So those are.
Is- Are there any other comments from the board that we should hear at this point to help us incorporate into what we'll next resubmit?
Did you have a chance to look at, Dan's,
I just got it.
Dan, do you want to comment right now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. It's just, mostly just some clarifications. One that, I would say was probably a scrivener's error where the flow at the village supplies, how much water the village supplies. It's called out in the report at 1.3 billion gallons a day, which is more like New York City kind of water. We're really at 3.8 million gallons a day. So I just want to make sure that's corrected, because obviously their flow would be extremely dwarfed by 1.3 billion gallons of flow. We did meet with the highway department to talk about sanitary sewers. They indicated that there were no problems that they were aware of, but we would like the applicant that I can talk to their engineer about a couple of pipes we may want to just verify have sufficient capacity downstream from the facility. And finally, we reviewed the SWIP. It's included in the appendices, and it appears the applicant covered all the bases in terms of what's required to have a SWIP that's compliant with the general permit. It looks like they've done that. But we do want to also look at some of the downstream conveyances and be aware of some other issues that even though they're attenuating the storm flows down below the pre-development levels, we want to make sure that all the downstream conveyances aren't clogged, undersized, or have any problems. So again, that's something we could sit down with the project engineer and run through and make sure we have it covered. Because there may be some offsite improvements that could result from that analysis.
Do the board members have any other comments?
I have one comment about the traffic study. I think, if I remember correctly, in the scoping, we asked for the traffic study to include an estimate of the delay time that a car would experience at the Route 9A intersection. So I think someone at the time told me that the number of peak trips could be translated using some standard methodology into delay times. I didn't see it, and I was wondering if you could do that, because I know that while it's interesting to compare the number of trips from between the proposed project and the different alternatives, what people are most interested in is like how that translates to delay. One of the, I think only, let's see, I think there was only one of the alternatives that resulted in more trips, more car trips in the morning and evening, while the other ones resulted in fewer. that would be interesting to see, in terms of the light times. Would that be possible? I imagine it doesn't scale linearly.
So I do recall that there was quite a bit of discussion about the delay time. And just trying to understand your question, there's the traffic study and then there's the traffic assessment that was in the alternatives. In the traffic study, we did an analysis of delay time having to do with the improvements to Croton Dam Road. And that was the most significant improvement and benefit from the proposed improvements in widening that road. So we focused on reducing the delay time in that respect. But we didn't apply that same analysis to each one of the alternatives.
Would that be possible, or is that pointless from an analysis point of view? Is that reasonable to ask for?
Well, could have been done, yes. Could have been done.
I mean, that's from a traffic point of view, that's the only metric that the neighborhood cares about.
I'm just trying to think through how meaningful it would be. I mean, we have 14 alternatives. And some of them are not very different. And do we have analysis, for instance, for the occupation of the hospital? I don't know if that's the meaning that would be meaningful for you. Certainly, if we wanted to apply it to some representative development.
Well, you have the peak number of trips
Yeah.
already, and I imagine that you derive the delay times from those peak trips, all right?
Right, but I'm trying to think through if some of the, for instance, the one-family subdivision, if someone were to do that, they probably would not be making improvements to Croton Dam Road.
I think that's a critical issue to acknowledge, which is,
I think that's important to point out. It could fall in your favor, absolutely, with that improvement.
but I guess the project proposes that mitigation as a benefit, and it can be funded based on the scale of the project. Assuming that improvement would occur at a smaller scale is very theoretical. There's not much likelihood of that.
I'm not talking about changing the scale of the proposed improvements.
But the improvements at that intersection would not be part of the smaller scale project in all likelihood. So,
Right, but that's not so much your concern, right?
If it's a smaller project and there's no improvement,
Right, then it's a fair comparison.
there might be a delay, there might not be a delay.
Right.
Or an increased,
so you're saying take existing conditions without the mitigation for the other alternatives? That's what you're saying? I'm sorry, I didn't
Well, the
understand.
alternative that you would not have been making the improvements.
Right, I understand that now, yeah.
Right, because you're not planning on building these other alternatives.
Right.
That'd be
Okay.
someone else's problem to make.
Right,
a
right, so you're saying,
alternatives.
to give it perspective, if this was, if any of these alternatives were done without the mitigation,
Right.
what would be the comparison?
That would
That would be it, yes.
I think most of the comparisons are gonna go back to that same point, because especially the commentary, the comments that we've heard from the crowd to date, the alternatives that they've been bringing here
Yeah.
has been, conforming lots to the zoning district. So when we're talking about alternatives, I'm gonna be going back to the R15 conforming lot development
Right.
as a comparison, and I think the community will as well.
And we have comparisons,
Right.
You know, the impacts of that sort of development as compared to what we're proposing. What we hadn't done, to your point, is without the intersection improvements and And we can do that.
That would be great, thank you.
I also have one more concern, and it's dealing with Austining Union Free School District letter from Raymond Sanchez to the planning board, March 17th. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, it's public record, but we urge you to take into account the concerns raised within his letter and any projects that come before us, the planning board, for consideration. The town school, Raymond Sanchez expressed dire concern about any major development. And having 188 units with X amount of children is gonna have a dire impact on the school system. And I don't know whether or not what you stated as the amount of money that you're giving to the school and the amount of children that we, the planning board, are in agreement with. And it says that you need to go back to Ray Sanchez and the school and the town board and discuss that. His letter was, it's a very scary letter saying development, March 17th
Of this year.
of this year.
I don't think we've seen that letter. If we can get a copy of that letter, I think we should.
It just puts into perspective that we would be crazy to approve 188 units. This is, what? That's right here.
It's not posted.
We had discussions with Mr. Sanchez, and the number, my understanding was that the number that was in the agreement was a number that he agreed to. So
Well,
this is
people do make changes and comments and things like that, and when he's the supervisor of not just the town of Austin, but the village of Austin, and he hears other developments going on, and not just the town and the village, he expressed concern. He's in charge of the schools. And whether or not your statement says, I'm gonna have 20 students, or 50, or 100 students, or 5, every child has an impact. Every child.
We respect that.
And I go on the worst, if you had 188 units and they were 2 bedrooms, your whole philosophy back then was, oh, we're only gonna have X amount of children. I look at it this way, you have a den, there's a child in it. You have a second bedroom, you have a child in it. That's worst case scenario, because you cannot say, building a luxury complex, rental complex, and it's gonna be X children there, and everything like that. And you go, look at Pleasantville, look at this town, look at that town. I'm looking at, the economy can change. There's a bedroom right there. I'm putting a kid in there. I might put 2 kids in there. Some of us grew up with like a second bedroom in our house, and maybe it was just 1 single child or 2. But what Mr. Sanchez says is a concern to us, should be a concern to you, and it's a major concern to the public.
Having the opportunity to do that letter, we've not seen it before, and there are standards for calculation of the number of school children that are accepted practice in analyses like these, and we understand and respect that the school district's impacts of the school district are important focus for this analysis.
Again, you have 188 units, how many of them are 2 bedrooms? If every single one has 2 bedrooms, that's 100, in my eyes, that's 188 children additional.
Mark, the document in front of you details the number of 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom. So, and all the analyses is based on the breakdown of 1 and 2 bedrooms. It's not increasing the number of 2s. And then separately, we had extended meetings with both the school board and the school administration going back more than a year and a half ago. And in those discussions, which they participated and made their own consultants advise them, we looked at 3 methodologies for figuring out how many students would be generated by the project. We looked at first.
I'm gonna stop you right
Just
there.
let me finish.
No, I'm gonna stop you right there. That was a year and a half ago.
Thank you.
This is a month ago.
Yes, but this also,
Okay.
also, to be clear, this letter is spoken in terms of, and we take, the superintendent's letter with great weight. But it is in a generic fashion.
Right.
It's just mentioning that all developments should have this as consideration. And if indeed, in the process of doing the project, you have made discussions with the superintendent and the school district, we would like to have that documented for us to understand and be able to analyze the calculations that was right.
And I think it's important that people understand what happens so that you don't go away with misperceptions.
Right.
We went through 3 different methodologies to figure that out. It wasn't just us, it was jointly with the school. We looked at what the Avalon in town, which is 156 units, what that's throwing off. It's throwing off very few students. We looked at all of the other new similar projects throughout the county. This is jointly done. We use what's also known, and David Stolman knows this methodology, Rochelle and Lissigan, they are consultants from Rutgers University, and they prepare these kinds of school generation rates. And then thirdly, we used a Bay Area economics. So we used 3 methodologies. We put together a table. Again, all this is being done jointly with the school board. And we came up with a range of students. All of this is in the document in front of you. And they agreed to it. And the numbers we have are higher than what is the experience, generally speaking, for similar projects around town. We then got into a lengthy discussion as to how can we make payments to the school district so that they could expand classrooms and do other means of mitigating our impact. And all of that is documented in agreement with the school district that you have. I don't know if it's included as an addendum, but we have circulated it to the town and to the town board.
Is it in the addendum? Is it in the addendum?
We can get it.
If it isn't, we will provide it here.
This, the members need to
Appendix C. Appendix C.
So I'm looking at the DIS page, chapter 5, page 26, and I'd like to point this out for any members of the community as well. There's a very nice table that compares all of the different analysis results across the different alternatives. And many of the things that we've been asking about are captured in summary form here. But in addition to this, I wonder if I could ask for one more table to be generated. And that would be a simpler table that would have, as in this table, all the alternatives across the top. And down vertically, in the section for traffic, just the trips AM, trips PM, which you have already. The delays for the different alternatives, as we were discussing before. And a yes and a no box for whether the tax revenues generated would cover the increase in school costs. And I see that you summarized that, so you have that data for yes and no already there. But I think if we had the table just with those, that subset of information, I think it would be very easy for people to take a look at it, because it may very well be that your project loses on the, and this is hypothetical, it loses on the traffic comparison, but wins on the school comparison. Because despite the question of how you did the estimate of your number of school kids, I presume that that methodology was the same across all of the different alternatives. And so, some of the errors that might be associated with, as Mark was describing, if we're not taking into account extra bedrooms and so forth. I imagine that would be true in these other alternatives as well. So if we can take these numbers as relative values with confidence, then your proposal looks much better than many of the other alternatives from a school point of view. So, but that potential benefit to you is really lost in the depth of this data. And if you read this simpler table, I think it would be to your benefit. And I think it would be good to see.
Okay.
Further comments? So we look forward to seeing another.
Thanks very much. All right, thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, that's, the next item on the agenda is draft order 2, amending the zoning, tree protection cabaret towers.
We're gonna walk you through that?
Let's go through it.
Okay. So this is, one of the many iterations of local law. I believe that the town board's getting closer to. Each have a copy? So the purpose of this local law is primarily to implement recommendations of the comprehensive plan. This is probably the third phase of doing that. The comprehensive plan was adopted in 2002, town comprehensive plan. It was updated at the end of 2015, just before Steve Donnelly left office. And the purpose of this local law is largely to implement recommendations of the comprehensive plan. So on the first page, the town board has decided that it would, well, it hasn't decided anything until it actually adopts this. But the local law removes self-storage facilities from the list of permitted uses in the general business zone. General business district runs along North State Road. There isn't any general business zoning elsewhere in the town, and self-storage facilities would come out of the list of permitted uses. So the single existing self-storage facility on North State Road would become what our code calls a grandfathered use. It's really a non-conforming use. On the second page, we're trying to improve the setback and buffer requirements between residential and non-residential uses. So I'm just going to read this middle paragraph, and you can see anything that has double underline is an addition, and anything that has strikeout is to be deleted. So it says, between any non-residential use and a residentially used or residentially zoned lot, a buffer area at least 20 feet wide, so that's an increase from 15 to 20, with native, non-invasive landscape screening shall be provided. Such planting shall be a mix of evergreen shrubs and coniferous and deciduous tree species. Said coniferous tree shall have an initial height of at least 6 feet. Said deciduous tree shall have a minimum caliper of 4 inches as measured 12 inches above finished grade, and said tree shall have an expected ultimate height which suits their intended purpose and shall be planted close enough to form a visual barrier. So it's improving this section of the code. At the sole discretion of the approval authority, a 6-foot-high wall or fence suitable in appearance to the surrounding area may be substituted for or be required to supplement the the landscape plantings as a visual barrier for the residential property from the non-residential use. Proper maintenance of all fencing and landscape planting shall be a continuing requirement. All such vegetation shall be maintained in a healthy and vigorous growing condition. All vegetation not so maintained shall be replaced with new comparable vegetation at the beginning of the next growing season. All fences shall be installed with the more attractive side-facing neighbors. I should also mention, for the record, that Donna Sherrod has been reviewing these iterations and making comments, and we've been trying to accommodate her to the extent we can. Going to the top of page 4, bottom of page 3, top of page 4, we have the same kind of language for parking areas for non-residential uses adjoining residentially used or residentially zoned land. So the language is the same in both cases. Then on page 4 in the middle, we have the GB1 district. The GB1 district encompasses land down along the Croton River, where Manny and Fiorito have trucks that they store down there. And it goes up into the upper level of Crotonville. And years ago, well, if you look at A1 that's being struck out, this basically says that any permitted use permitted in and is regulated by the GB district, that's the North State Road GB district, is permitted in the GB1 district. When the GB1 district was created, it just referred to the GB district for many uses. The GB district on North State Road several years ago was, the list of permitted uses was greatly expanded to include all kinds of things that you wouldn't want to have in the GB1 district. But the GB1 district was never corrected or changed to limit the uses that would be permitted in the GB1 zone. Does that make sense? So we no longer want to refer to the uses permitted in the GB district on North State Road. Since there's such different kinds of districts, we want the GB district on North State Road to have its own list of permitted uses, and this GB1 district have its own list of permitted uses. So,
Quick question.
yeah,
Is
sure.
GB1 always a subset of GB permitted uses? Or is there
It always had
something
been.
below that?
It always had been.
Okay.
But when the list of permitted uses on North State Road was vastly increased and broadened, they became permitted down along the Croton River as well. So we really need a list for the North State Road GB district and a different list for the GB1 district in Crotonville and down along the Croton.
Is that the only GB1 district there is?
Yes, in that area.
Okay, so any of these changes are currently unique to that area?
Yes, yes. The next would be the NC district. And the only place where the NC district is located is in Crotonville.
Say it again.
The only place where the NC district is located is in Crotonville.
Okay.
And the NC district is a less intensive district than the GB1 district. So, as a matter of fact, if we flip all the cards and turn to the last page for a minute, hopefully you have a graphic. Yeah. On the westerly side of Stanley Avenue, there's a rather large parcel that's zoned GB1 in the heart of Crotonville. On the westerly side of Stanley Avenue and on the southerly side of Old Albany Post Road, there's a big lot, great big lot that's zoned GB1. And the proposal is to change that to NC, which is a much less intensive district than the GB1 district.
Is that dealing with all the recent letters that we've gotten over the past couple of days?
Not exactly, not exactly. If you look at where the bend in the road is,
Right,
where it actually says Old Albany Post Road,
right.
and the parcel that's immediately west of the road, there's a small parcel that's kind of diamond shaped, sort of.
Right.
That was owned by Curtin.
Russell Curtin.
Right.
And Susan Curtin.
That's been bought by Fiorito, and that parcel, at one point in this process, had been designated as residential, and at another point in the process had been designated as NC. And Mr. Fiorito has been petitioning the town board to leave it as GB1, so he can build a kind of a storage building there to park trucks. Anyway, getting back,
Currently is a GB.
what's that?
Currently is.
It currently is GB1, that's correct.
Currently is GB1, but it's historically and it's currently residential use.
Okay, okay.
So there's a nice house on it.
We'll get back to that in a little while. But if we could turn to page 5. We have a list of uses that are permitted in the NC district. And again, the NC district is the neighborhood commercial district and is only located in the heart of Crotonville. So, stores and shops for the conduct of any retail business excluding drive-through establishments is a permitted use. Turning to the top of page 6, personal service establishments is a permitted use. And you can see restaurants, offices, fire and police stations, and the town board is contemplating adding artist live workspaces. And this artist live workspace use has a lot of standards and provisions regulating it. If we turn to page,
And you said that's the only NC area
in the entire town.
in the entire town.
If we turn to page 9, the town board is contemplating adding mixed uses to that zone. And a mixed use is defined as, or will be defined as, a building that has a non-residential use permitted in the zoning district in which it is located on the street level and a residential use on the level or levels above. So non-residential on the first level, residential on the level or levels above. That's a mixed use.
Where was that? On page 8?
Well, it starts on page 8, but the definition of mixed use is on page 13. Besides artist live work and mixed use, if you turn to page 10, the town board is contemplating adding one-family detached dwellings, two-family detached dwellings, and multiple family dwellings. Either a part of Knowles kind of multifamily or townhouses.
Is residential currently permitted?
In the NC?
Yeah.
No.
Just based on the letter we received from the superintendent of schools, I'm wondering if we should be adding that.
That would be perhaps a good point to make to the town board. And if I could just digress for a minute, in the zoning law, there are two kinds of reports that it says that you should make to the town board. There are reports, because they've asked for an advisory report from you. Report to the planning board, report of the planning board, and making such a, okay. With respect to text amendments, there are certain topics that they say you should talk about. And with respect to zoning map changes, there's another list of topics you should talk about in your report. So, for example, on a text amendment, whether such change is consistent with the aims and principles embodied in this chapter as to the particular districts concerned, which areas, land uses, buildings, and establishments in the town will be directly affected by such change and in what way they will be affected, the indirect implications of such change and its effect on other regulations, and whether such proposed amendment is consistent with the aims of the comprehensive development plan of the town. Now, I'm reading from section 200-52. And you can talk about anything else you want. And then with respect to zoning map changes, whether the uses permitted by the proposed change would be appropriate in the area concerned, whether adequate public school facilities and other public facilities and services, including roads, exist or can be created to serve the needs of any additional residences or other uses likely to be constructed as a result of such change. Whether the proposed change is in accord with any existing or proposed plans in the vicinity. The effect of the proposed amendment upon the growth of the town is envisaged by the comprehensive development plan, and whether the proposed amendment is likely to result in an increase or decrease in the total zone residential capacity of the town and the probable effect thereof. So I would think hitting on schools should impact on schools should be a consideration.
In addition to increasing setbacks in that area, where you're looking to create a buffer, is there any reason for us to look at the existing building and lot coverage requirements in those areas to kind of mitigate that as well?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We're only increasing it by 5 feet. So, in my estimation, it's not going to have any effect on the building coverage maximum or the maximum impervious lot surface, that kind of thing. Okay. And then in the NC, if you turn to page 12, there are 2 special permit uses in the NC district approvable by the town board, which the town board is contemplating removing. On page 12, D1 and 2, fully enclosed eating and drinking establishments where live entertainment or live music is supplied or provided, and fully enclosed eating and drinking establishments where music is provided for dancing and dancing is permitted. At this moment, it appears that the town board doesn't believe that those are appropriate and appropriate. There used to be a place like that, but I think it burnt down.
I wish it wasn't permitted on North State Road either. The dance club,
Yeah.
the Broadway dance club, they keep breaking the law. We keep calling the police on them.
There's a little bit in here regarding cabarets, which we'll get to soon, and it would apply to that
I was
place.
talking about the dance school. It's not a dance school, or a dance. It's not much, I've taken salsa lessons there. I have to recuse myself, but it's a very low-key affair, I believe.
Not with their plastic music at the time,
Okay, you guys are in
The
there.
police arrive and the minute the police leave, they raise the volume again.
I'll stay out of that one.
So then at the bottom of page 12, going into page 13, we have some amendments to amendments to a variety of definitions that exist in the code already. So in the first one, bed and breakfast establishment, we're saying at the end there, the term bed and breakfast establishment shall not include an inn, a boarding house, or a rooming house. Those are different things than B&B. Next one is just adding the term building or the word building to height, so we're talking about a building. The next definition is of inn, and this would say seating for food and beverage service shall be limited to the number of guests staying at the inn. An inn shall be limited to 15 guest rooms. The term inn shall not include a B&B, a boarding house, or a rooming house. And then we have an improvement to the definition of mixed use, because the only place where mixed use was permitted previously or has been permitted is in the GB district. And then an improvement to retail store or shop and wholesale establishment, because those terms have been sometimes difficult to interpret, especially on North State Road at times. And then in 7, we have a definition of artist live workspace. And then in 8, we have B&B is a permitted use in certain districts, but there are no regulations, so this would provide regulations for B&Bs. And number 9 in the middle of page 14 is an equation which limits the maximum size of a home to its lot size. And we looked at all of the single-family lots in the town. This is not gonna crimp anything. It's just gonna make sure that no one builds a ginormous home on a relatively small lot. So on an acre, you could build 5,000 square feet. There aren't many 5,000 square foot homes in Newtown. I can bring you the data next time. I didn't bring it with me tonight. But this just keeps monster homes from being built, but it really doesn't affect any existing home in the town right now. And then in 10, we have parking requirements for artist-led workspace and bed and breakfast establishment. And then on page 15, we have some new lighting.
It says, the online bed and breakfast, like Airbnb, has that definition been taken into account here?
No, we didn't, we tried to stay within the recommendations of the comprehensive plan instead of changing the comprehensive plan or doing things where we would have to change the comprehensive plan. This isn't sort of the be-all and end-all, but dealing with Airbnb probably requires a change to the comprehensive plan and then some zoning amendments. So we tried very hard to limit ourselves to those existing recommendations in the comprehensive plan. Because there's a moratorium going on, we're trying to finish this, in a timely manner. But you could recommend to the town board that it take that subject up, and it can be pretty thorny.
I think, I would guess that there are a wide variety of views on that topic. I'd like to register my view, which is that I think Airbnb is a good thing, even in regular neighborhoods. Low impact, it allows people, especially as kids, have, left the nest to, utilize their homes in a reasonable way so that they can stay in their homes, on fixed incomes and so forth. So, if it's currently allowed by default, I would advocate not touching it.
Sometimes there's building code and fire code, and you want to make sure that it's, I know other municipalities are dealing with fire and building code issues to make sure that it's safe.
Yeah,
Because you don't have,
that's a very important consideration. And maybe the regulations could be written to say that it would be allowed, but with such and such a extra safety.
It's a topic that has not come up, and I imagine it would be a controversial process to drive something.
We might be able to limit it just to safety issues, not get into more zoning parts that are.
Maybe some night when we're doing River Knoll, like the public hearing for the EIS where we have 1,000 people, we could take a vote.
That'd be interesting.
Then on page 15, we have some lighting standards, which would, I think, prove helpful.
I see it.
What's that, Mark?
I'm fine with 3,000 Kelvin.
Sorry, can I go back
Yeah,
to
sure.
item 9?
Of course.
Maximum floor area for a one-family residence that
Mhm.
we put in there.
Mhm.
What are we defining as floor area?
Oh,
Finished and unfinished?
I will tell you what floor area is defined as. And I hope I'm going to find a definition.
You talking like a basement or garage or?
Well, if we're not counting the unfinished areas,
Right.
it's an opportunity to finish it later and exceed the number, or are we just gonna let the footprint be what it is and then the basement's not permitted once you reach that threshold?
usually it's sometimes floor grade, right, it's not floor area. There's a definition in this code, so every code is different.
Okay.
Exactly.
So floor area is the sum of the gross horizontal areas of the several floors of the building or buildings on a lot, measured from the exterior face of exterior walls or from the center line of party walls separating two buildings, excluding cellar and basement areas used only for storage or for the operation and maintenance of the building. So whether the attic is finished or not finished, it gets included.
And basement.
And the basement and cellar, and we have a definition of cellar. I would expect that we would have a definition of basement as well.
So
They
finish.
do get included.
Right. So,
We have a definition of basement as well.
so once they've hit that 5,000 square feet, they're not allowed to finish their basement because it exceed that 5,000 square feet.
It's not finished.
On that lot size.
Or if we're excluding basements altogether,
We're excluding cellar and
Are we
basement
excluding it
areas
when it's
used
finished?
only for storage or for the operation and maintenance of the building. So,
Finish.
it doesn't say whether it's finished or not.
Let's see how you do it.
Well, by definition, if you finish it, you're not using it only for storage.
Right, yeah.
I'm
Okay.
usually
Alright.
looking to get around these laws. So
Mhm.
if you're trying to
Right.
limit the house
I
at
think you're right.
5,000 square feet, then we should just be clear that when we say it excludes the basement, that
Yeah,
they can't
we should
finish the basement
clarify it
later.
here. If that's something before you make a
Mhm.
recommendation,
Mhm.
to do that. So it's clear.
I could be part of the recommendation that it be clarified.
Is that too restrictive, if somebody can have a finished basement and only 5,000, not only 5,000, it's not, so that, some houses are 6,000,
The 5,000 square foot house is uncommon in Ossining, but
Okay.
it's more common in some of our neighboring towns, so.
I think even including some of the basement, will still be under, the cap. Okay, should we move on? And then on page 16, in two places, we say permeable pavement shall be used for driveways. Well, up on the top, it's for parking and loading areas. And in the paragraph E, it's for driveways and other paved areas unless otherwise approved by the planning board. So the new standard will be permeable pavement unless you allow them to use non-permeable pavement. And then in F, structural soil shall be used in the planting of landscaping and street trees in areas that would pose as a barrier to air, water, and/or root growth at the plant's mature size. And structural soil is the kind of soil that I believe Cornell came up with, or they have a kind of structural soil anyway that they came up with that is difficult to compact. And compaction is, what will kill roots. And so the use of structural soil in those situations where, say you've got a small area for a tree to be planted that's surrounded by pavement, in the planting of that tree, structural soil should be used.
That's sort of a counterintuitive word, a structure or a phrase, structural soil. It brings to mind, like rocky, clay,
Bearing capacity.
bearing capacity, right?
Mhm.
So it's sort of the opposite of what it's intending to say.
Yeah, that's the term that's used for it though.
Will everyone know that, or can there be an asterisk that defines structural soil?
We can put something in
Yeah,
here.
that makes more sense to define it in case it changes over time.
Good idea. So we'll go ahead and do that. Okay. And then, number 14 on page 17. This is in the section on what constitutes a site plan, or what are site plan elements.
Can you go back to the cabaret thing?
We're going forward to the cabaret thing.
Oh, okay. You
We're
have,
not there yet. We're not there yet.
You have hours of operation.
We're not there yet,
We
Mark.
have not been, we're still there.
Okay, yes. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So in terms of site plan elements, those items which are shown graphically shall be shown in a manner or manners which allows the planning board to envision the various elements of said development or use, including at the discretion of the board, the preparation of plans, sections, elevations, perspectives, etc. as applicable. So it gives you more latitude in terms of what you can ask for.
Could we codify a requirement that nearby homes be shown? Like if,
It's already in there.
it's already in there, oh, okay, great.
And then section 4 in the middle of page 17 shows in text form what the map on the back shows. So it shows the Watscan Dam property being rezoned from GB1 to NC, and it shows, and the owner's name here on the, where did I get this? Westchester County mapping. Instead of Curtin, it shows Curl.
No, it's a different lot you're talking about here. That's on the other street. The 1/5 Drive is on the other side of
Where's the wrong one?
Stanley, I think. Yeah. It's on the other side of Stanley.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Curtin lot is not on here because the zoning's not changing.
Or,
I just confused myself.
right.
So it's, if you turn to the back, that lot, the second lot in the table is the lot that's being changed from R5 to R7.5. So there could be fewer, if that lot gets subdivided, there could be fewer homes. And it's adjacent to an existing R7.5 zone. Okay. You want to talk about the map now? 'Cause I know you've got a comment or two.
Yeah, so, no, yeah, go ahead, you first.
I already did.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, I've gotten an earful from a lot of my neighbors. I live in this neighborhood, and there's a very strong feeling against the change in the plan, which was going to be to change the lot that, of the Curtin property from GB1 to residential in one option, and from GB1 to NC in another option, right? That's like Plan A and Plan B.
Yeah, there were previous iterations of this map
Right.
that Garrett's talking about. Thanks.
So there was a Plan A and a Plan B, and in both cases, the zoning of that lot was going to be changed in a direction favorable toward a neighborhood. So the neighbors, those neighbors who have come to me, they said that they assumed, well, whichever way it goes, it'll be better than it is now. And so then this more recent change in the view of the board, that, oh, let's keep it GB1 after all, because Mr. Fiorito, who is a contractor in the area, bought it. And he's been attending all of the board meetings, whereas neighborhood residents have not been attending the board meetings. So he has apparently convinced some of the board members to let that remain GB1 so that he can tear down an existing home on it and build a commercial garage, a garage that he would rent out to contractors to store their trucks.
Is that home currently occupied?
That home is not currently occupied. And it is an eyesore, but it's a home with a lot of history and a lot of character. And it has traditionally performed the very valuable function of being a visual barrier, a visual block between the neighborhood and the GB1 district, which consists of Butler buildings, car repair shops, as a Corvette shop, welding shops, and other contractor storage rental areas. That GB1 district right now is a horrible eyesore and is completely out of character with the rest of the Crotonville neighborhood, which is all very small, modest, historical homes from the 1920s time frame for the most part. So this property was an important visual buffer. And now the neighbors feel like the rug has been pulled out from under them with this proposed change to leave it GB1 and let it become a commercially used property. So there have been 4 letters so far, and I'm told by neighbors that more are coming in and that they are going to come to the town board meeting next Wednesday to make their feelings known. Since tonight was a working session, they said, we wouldn't be able to say anything anyway, so they weren't going to come. I asked them to come anyway, but they said, well, we'll just wait until it's the town board. But their feelings are strong, and speaking as a neighbor, I completely agree that that it should, with them, that it should be changed to residential. And as a planning board member, putting on a different hat, I say that it's changing that to commercial, or keeping it in its current commercial GB1, but changing its use to a commercial use is completely out of character with the neighborhood, and it would serve to take the neighborhood in a direction that is not only very unfavorable for a neighborhood that has been improving over the years, but also it's completely in the opposite direction of what the comprehensive plan speaks about for that neighborhood. So
It does seem like an anomaly off of Old Albany Post Road to have this little jut of GB1 sticking onto that road, if everything else next to it is residential or NC.
And another point I would make, which is an addendum to what you just said, if you look from a map view at that little lot, it looks like, in planar view, it's adjacent to this larger GB1 down here, which has like Manny's Movers and Fiorito and maybe a few other rented, they store things, and they have bulldozers and so forth down there. So it looks like it's directly adjacent to that, but in fact this is a cliff. The boundary, the northern boundary of this property in question is a cliff of about maybe 50 feet or so, a very substantial cliff. So there's a very substantial visual break between the industry that's going on down on Croton River Road and what's going on there up in the neighborhood.
Yeah, there are 2 completely different levels.
And the Manny's portion is lower or higher?
Manny is all lower. It's out of sight of all the neighborhood.
You see Croton River Road there
Yeah.
on the map?
No, I drive by it all the time. I always noticed that it seemed to be high, but I couldn't tell where it dropped off. No, it doesn't. Thank you for your time.
Just to be clear, the comprehensive plan, which I don't have with me, doesn't recommend that Crotonville, doesn't directly recommend that all of Crotonville be residential. But it does say that the town board should explore doing that. And in prior iterations, there was a lot more residential in NC, but a lot more residential than is shown on the map. And Gareth, you're absolutely right. Property owners whose property would have been changed, or whose zoning would have been changed, came out. But unfortunately, none of the residents came out, none of the homeowners came out. And you're right, Mr. Fiorito came to practically every meeting, and
Which is a bike.
right, stayed his test.
But since they have not taken action on it yet, they still have an opportunity to make their case.
Yes.
When did you purchase the property?
I think not too long ago. Do you know, Sandy?
So the wheels had already been turning in terms of converting this to an NC for residential neighborhood.
Yes.
Before we bought it.
In 2002, the comprehensive plan said the town board should explore changing the zoning of Crotonville to residential, R5 or R7.5.
And he bought it after 2002.
He bought it probably 2 months ago.
In 2015, that point of view in the comprehensive plan was reaffirmed with the comprehensive plan update.
Okay, so he took the risk.
He took the risk. The Plan A and the Plan B, sorry to interrupt you. Plan A and Plan B were already very much public knowledge when he purchased it.
So is it being inconsistent to make the recommendation that be a residential property, but that the proposed uses for NC not include residential uses?
No, I don't think so.
No, if you're gonna have NC, yeah, why not just have it in NC?
But the,
I don't think it's
your
inconsistent.
NC
There's
proposed,
different reasoning.
right, to have residential uses, but now we're saying maybe that shouldn't include residential uses in the NC, right?
Right. But I think that Gareth is making a point regarding one particular parcel which would have one home on it. So we're not saying get rid of the residential in the NC, but put 1,000 homes on that piece. It's only one home.
Who would be against NC?
Well,
But it
there's an
depends on what
R5,
NC really is.
there's an R5 district right across the street. So the zoning of that parcel could be an extension of this R5 zone.
Right.
So that would make sense.
Yeah, to make it
And
accessible.
as a matter of fact, it was like that on one version of, an earlier version of the proposed zoning map.
But if the comprehensive plan was recommending residential uses, and now the NC proposal currently has residential uses, but we're saying it shouldn't allow residential uses as of right, is that inconsistent with what we're doing in the whole
Yeah.
neighborhood? Yeah,
With the rest of the neighborhood.
yeah.
Yeah, with the rest of the neighborhood.
Well, I think we're either
Well,
talking
we can
about
address
making it NC and having it fall in line with a non-residential list of uses that we were discussing, or you make it an R5 and fit it into the neighboring zoning district and leave it as a residential lot.
Right, I understand making this lot, extending the R5, but I'm questioning so that you would just extend the R5 here to this lot.
Instead of changing it GB1 to NC.
Right, but where the
GB1 to
NC now,
R5
right next
or
to it,
R7.
you were saying you don't want to now, you want to recommend, or that was a thought, not having residential uses here.
I'm
You-
still thinking that.
I just wanted to know that if the goal was to expand residential uses, if saying not having residential uses
See,
in the adjoining lot.
I don't consider that the one lot that Gareth is referring to as expanding it, because
No, I don't think
historically,
so
it's a residential lot.
I thought that was a recommendation in the comp plan, to consider
The
that area.
comp plan said, look at Crotonville and think about the possibility of making all of Crotonville R5 and R7.5.
In that Crotonville,
Yes.
so instead you considered
So the town board
putting
is rejecting,
residential uses in the
Yeah.
NC.
right, the town board is rejecting, so far, at this point, is rejecting changing that large lot on the westerly side of Stanley Avenue to R5 or R7.5. And they are also rejecting leaving it as GB1, because that's kind of a heavy-duty use, and making it NC, and adding residential.
So, I mean, the neighborhood would love it if that large lot were changed to R5. But that's a heavy lift, because that's a dramatic change. I think that their bigger concern really is this tiny little lot here, and whether that can be made residential so that it will provide the visual and aesthetic buffer from this commercial area, whereas currently, it currently has that function, but if that were taken out, then there would be no issue.
Does that lot have enough square footage to be subdivided
No, it's tiny.
if it's R5? Just confirming.
Well, what would be the downside?
I don't think so, but I wouldn't bet my.
Okay, good.
What's the downside of having it converted to an NC, as far as the neighbors concerned?
Well, I mean, it would be a step in the right direction, but if it were NC, then some of the uses that you were talking about that sort of have commercial flavor to them would would still be a degradation of, the neighborhood quality. Much less so than if it were going to be turned into a garage under GP1. So it would be a step in the right direction.
I mean, if it's truly a buffer from the rest of the neighborhood between the NC light commercial that we're talking about and the residential neighborhood, and it's historically residential neighborhood, residential property, I'm inclined to say, let it be the buffer that it's always been.
So change it to R5?
Yeah.
That house, that property is always, let it stay always residential. But again, this map is not showing that property right there, this piece right here.
I can,
Is it this
outline
one right
it.
here?
It's hard to see. Yeah, exactly. It's
Okay, so right now that's GB1, but it's a residential house.
exactly, there's a house,
Right.
just sort of sitting like that.
So shall the report reflect that that lot should be
Always
Five.
stay residential.
What's everybody else?
I agree with you.
I mean, I certainly, I would have no question about converting to NC. I'm just thinking, is it viable to change it to an R?
I might point out also that on this side, it's directly adjacent to these three little houses, very much in
I was looking at how
the
it,
same character.
how it changes up there to 7.5 up there. I'm sorry, it's
Oh,
it's an R5. It's, yeah, it's over here, right? Yeah, this portion is R7.5.
Right.
Right.
But across the street is R5.
Right, across the street R5, but right next to it further north would be 7.5. So yes, that whole area would be,
That's 7.5?
7.5, but there are three little properties right here, you can see,
uh-huh.
that are far below the 7.5.
Right, there are small little items
They're
there.
historic homes.
Right.
yeah. Right along the old Albany Post Road. So they go
It's a
back.
7.5.
I mean, maintaining an old character of a neighborhood. Heck, I came up from the Lower East Side, that place, you can't even recognize it anymore. Okay, all right. I take it folks are inclined to go for an R5?
What makes most sense, R5 or 7.5, based on the other properties?
Would it qualify for 7.5?
Good question.
I don't think we put you on the spot right now. We have to see.
It might be large enough, it might be 7,500 square feet.
I mean, if it's large enough for, to live in a 7.5 district, maybe that's where we should put it.
That's a good
I
idea.
I can measure it, and if it's 7,500 square feet or more,
You know, let it have the setbacks and the zoning characteristics that it should have. It's got to be adequate square footage.
I think that's a good idea, and it would allow the property owner, Mr. Fiuto, in this case, to make maximum use of, whatever single-family building he might put there.
If we're trying to do them a favor, we make it
Yeah,
R5. No.
7.5 is more restrictive.
Yeah.
It's more restrictive, I take it back now, okay. I was trying to do him a
it's
favor there.
less than 10,000 square feet, unless he's gonna get a variance, which he could.
Yeah, you're right.
It's one home anyway.
I
So I'll measure it.
Okay. I was trying to throw him a bone, but in the wrong way.
Should we move on?
Yeah, so you had a cabaret question, right?
Well, we're gonna get to that now.
Thank you.
Sure. So did you want to ask your cabaret question? Bottom of page 17?
No sound something.
If a property's gonna have, someone's gonna have a cabaret within it, the building has to be 101% completely soundproof. No noise can come in or out of that, can come out of that, whether it's roof or the door open or anything like that. That's gotta be somewhere in any building that's a cabaret that abuts or comes within 500 feet of a residential house. The noise is just, it's horrible. And to see a person on the planning, on the town board, we can't vote on because she's on the town board and that she's the next door neighbor of it, it's horrible. I mean, to see these people flaunting the law, I've gone to the town board meetings to protest on it. And it's, you hear boom, 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 boom. And I know that the police have been there at least 15 times, and the minute the police leave, they turn the music up and you hear it. I was gonna call the police last night, I was just too tired. And there were like 5 cars in there, but at the same noise level. I let the crickets stop me from calling last night. So I think somewhere in there, if someone's gonna have a cabaret, that building's gotta be completely soundproof, completely soundproof. It's gotta be, I mean.
Well, we have a noise chapter, and item C here on page 18 refers to the noise chapter and makes a direct reference, so that no one has to wonder, when they're reading the cabaret section, what applies in terms of noise. Dan, do you know what the town board is contemplating doing with, are they hiring a acoustical
Well,
engineer?
I'm actually supposed to meet, the ballroom's actually hired somebody,
Uh-huh.
and we're gonna meet out there and see what they're gonna suggest,
Mhm.
whether they're reasonable solutions.
I hear it every single
No, I
day. that
get
it's
it,
there.
we're not refuting that, but they've got to do something. So we're gonna see, he indicated, I guess there's a roll-up door that may need
It's
to be
coming
insulated.
through the roof, it's coming through the walls. I've
But
walked around the
I
property.
guess one of the other issues apparently that happens too is they've got a fire door that people keep opening to the smoke, so.
It's not, that's, I know I'm on TV, that's bullshit. It's coming through the walls, it's coming through the ceiling, it's coming through the glass wall, door, windows. It's the entire, it's a tin building with 0 insulation. And I do corporate interior work, and I do sound studios in New York City, and I know what a soundproof environment is, because when you're a landlord and you have a sound element in your property, the people below you and above you or next to you, you have to deaden that sound. And if you're doing a CNBC or NBC studio, you gotta be very cognizant of sound. That has nothing, that has 0.
But, they've got a sound engineer hired,
Yeah.
so we'll see if,
Wait till when they bring that up in front of the town board, I'm gonna have a field day with that. I'm just saying, I'm just very concerned about the noise of
Yeah.
everything like that. I'm hearing it firsthand, like you were saying, you live nearby me or
Well,
something.
part
I
of
did
it,
not move into a house to be next to a music studio
part of this is enforcement.
enforcement.
And section C says, no person shall operate or use or cause to be operated loudspeakers, musical instruments, or other sound production devices so as to produce sounds which are plainly audible inside a residence between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m.
I think 9 a.m., 9 p.m. I think 10 p.m., if it's next to a residential, people with children, those children go to bed 8 or 9 o'clock at night, not 10 p.m. I think 10 p.m. is way too late, and 7 a.m., that's like I don't have an opinion on that end, but 10 p.m., that's way too late. I think.
I think what we may need to look at is, the noise chapter should be applicable to any scenario.
Yeah, and it is.
And, so, we may have to revisit that, because to the point of enforcing it,
Right.
like, sound level in somebody's house is a difficult thing to, for a building inspector or a police officer to check. Usually a property line and some decibel threshold at a property line is the kind of thing you can enforce.
Well, that's in here as well.
No, I'm just saying,
That's the next sentence.
well,
At no time shall sound from these sources exceed the limitations set forth in Table 1 in Section 130-4C1, which is the noise chapter, which shall be reduced by 5 dBA for sound from sound production devices. Sound level measurements for compliance determination shall be conducted at or within the property line of an affected person. In addition, loudspeakers and other sound equipment must face into the geometric center of the property in which they are located.
I
So-
disagree with this. I really truly think that if it's in a building, that zero sound can penetrate those walls. It's simple. There's technology out there to make this building completely soundproof. And I don't care which way the speakers are. If someone's gonna have something cabaret or anything like that, the building's gotta be completely 100% soundproof. There's technology out there to do it.
Okay.
It's hard when you're dealing with an existing building. I mean, I have a case involving a barn.
The barn, they can very simply insulate it.
Right,
But you
you're
lose
requiring you're requiring you to retrofit the building.
Yeah,
And
you
that's-
lose, you lose the character of the barn.
This
You
was,
want
this
people to go
building
to
that
the
these
event to
people
have it in the
particularly
barn.
bought was never a dance studio.
You want that
to begin
rustic,
with.
you have to close in the wall. And that's not what people want when they go to an event at a barn. You're going for that rustic. feel.
Right.
So, I mean, it's hard to say on existing business, on existing buildings.
I think if this were enforced, and I suspect that it's not being enforced, I don't mean to throw anybody under the bus, but with better enforcement, I think you'd be hearing a lot less.
What are the penalties? Is it significant or not, or is it just price of doing business?
I don't know what the penalties are. I think they have been penalized once, and I don't see it being written up or even discussed in it. Like, every time they go, oh, by the way, someone's called the police 10 times. I can call every single day. I could have Kim Jeffries call every day. I could have my other neighbors call every single day. I could have Jim Bosimas call every day. But it's, I mean, I could literally probably get 100 people this signature of everyone on Morningside Drive to sign a document saying soundproof.
And how do we prove investments? You go out there at 3 o'clock in the morning with some
You
kind
could
of
actually
meter.
have
If I had a sound.
But you have to have the neighbors go
Well,
out.
somebody
and
could
read them.
record it, somebody could record it with a constant measure on the side so that you could actually have a comparison and then use it as evidence. But that, I mean, that's a separate issue. The question is whether, what's happening with the enforcement in it. If they're actually calling it and it's not happening, then that's not our job, right? I mean, if
If they
enforcement's failing,
violate it 3 times, they lose their license. That's what I think they should have. And they gotta close down.
3 times a month, 3 times a year,
3 times, once, twice, 3 times, you close that establishment. They're warned once, they're warned twice. I mean, to see these people flagrantly laugh at the police department, okay. And every time you get a different police officer going there.
Do the police just warn them and leave?
I am never part of that conversation. They stop it for 5 minutes. As soon as they see the police car go away, the music rises
I
again.
mean, it seems like it's an enforcement thing. If
Yeah.
you get an appearance ticket, then the
And
town
you're not calling
prosecutor should.
the town inspector on a Saturday or Sunday.
you don't need a town
evenings.
inspector. I mean, you don't need a building inspector for this. So you just need somebody to go be able to testify to the fact that it's reached a certain level, that the sound reached a certain level.
And there's fines that can be imposed and.
And once you have a couple of fines, the court has justification for increasing it,
It seems like
logarithmically.
It's an enforcement issue, not necessarily.
I'm just saying,
code
in general, I
amendment.
just think a building that
Whether
wants
they've reached that
a
threshold.
cabaret, it's near any residential, soundproof.
The sound threshold.
You need a
Somebody's
noise
gonna
meter.
have to come with a noise meter, and the building inspector's gonna have to come, or there's gonna have to be a code enforcement officer that
Well,
comes in your house.
Do we have a
That
noise
would-
meter?
I know,
at
but
all?
that's how this code is written.
Okay, but then,
Yeah,
So if
that's-
there's a complaint, you have to say, come to my house with the meter.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right,
so
and
the
that's how
police
you
have
enforce it, they
But
enforce it, great.
the police have no
They pay
issue.
for
It's
it.
not-
There has to be a code enforcement officer.
It has to be someone that enforces the zoning code, which is the code
So we're
enforcement.
gonna ask
officer.
John Hamilton to come over at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Well, wait a minute, the police can't,
The police usually don't do zoning. It's the code enforcement officer
but they
that
can do public
enforces.
nuisances.
They can do public nuisance, so I guess.
But apparently, whatever they're doing is not effective.
Right, but that seems like an enforcement issue, because I can't imagine the code not encompassing that.
They could send us the reports, the building.
They can send the building department the reports,
Right.
and then John could issue violation notices.
Yeah. We could do something big.
Mark, from what-
Reports, but if he doesn't get any reports,
I've called the police at least 15
From what I've
times.
heard though, I mean, the noise problem actually starts early. I mean, like, obviously it goes late,
Right,
but doesn't it start pretty early?
it starts pretty early, but you definitely notice it when you have no television or no other things
Right.
on in your house, and you hear boom, 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 the same songs every single day. Same boom, boom.
That's
It's,
Well, that's bad if you come with songs.
yes. It's, yeah. I was tempted to put up my house for sale and move because of that noise.
I mean, I think that the problem of forcing somebody to retrofit the building creates a lot of headaches. And I can understand the point about seeing a cabaret license, but that's, again, an enforcement question.
Someone buys a piece of property, they gotta be compliant they gotta be respectful of their neighbors. These people didn't even realize that there was residential nearby. They bought a building that was a tin can, and let's make a dance studio, and then let's have a cabaret license, let's have loud music.
Yeah, I mean, I think bottom line is it comes down to they've either got to do a more effective job of soundproofing the space or lower the volume. And as you said, otherwise it's an enforcement issue.
Yeah, if they're exceeding and violating the noise chapter, it's an enforcement issue. As someone said, it's not a matter of rewriting the noise chapter. If they're violating the noise chapter, it's an enforcement issue.
I'm just saying for the noise chapter for us, in my eyes, I'm giving an example. For anyone else in any other part of our town,
Is it a proper use for the current zoned neighborhood? It is, right? Even though it's a 10,
Limited to GB.
it's a GB?
It's a GB zone.
So, I mean, residents, when you move next to a GB zone,
Right.
what do you expect?
And I think it's problematic to say no sound whatsoever can come out of this property, because then you're gonna get into, well, are you allowed to mow your lawn? That creates sound. Are you allowed to have a barbecue at your house and place? I mean, it can't be no sound. I mean, I
Leaf
think it has
blowers are
to,
always a big one too.
right, leaf blowers, I mean,
but no one's doing the leaf blower at 10 o'clock at night.
right, and that's the problem. So it's back to enforcement. It's not really, if you know, wanna make a recommendation about 9 PM, that's a code issue, right?
Right, it would
Changing it
be
to
a change
9
to the noise chapter, or
Or here, changing this from 10 to 9, like.
we can't just change that because we're referencing the noise chapter.
Oh, okay.
But we can, for cabarets, we could say 9 o'clock, somehow, we
Right.
change the noise chapter, change the zone.
Well, that would seem to make less sense for a cabaret to close it at 9 o'clock.
No, not close.
Well, short of having somebody using no amplification,
Yeah.
possibly.
Well, cabarets in general may be a different case than this in particular, right?
Maybe you should concentrate on, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, parenthetically, there may be a way to help mitigate the problem by asking them to do their sound a little bit differently. For one thing, the sound engineer might be able to make some recommendations, like, maybe their speakers are, turned the wrong way. Could help bring it down 10%. Another thing is the way you describe the noise is boom, boom, boom. Lower frequencies carry longer distances, if I remember my physics correctly. So that's probably what you're hearing. If they were asked to turn down the bass, it's not a discotheque, right? So they don't really need the bass.
It's all about the days.
It's all about the It sounds silly, but it might make a big difference in terms of the
There
sound transmission.
are surface-mounted products that they can buy to install in this place, where you're not ripping the walls open, it's not a hardship. And they can install these things, these sound panels on the walls in there, kind of deaden sound before it escapes. And same way we're implementing additional requirements for screening between residential neighborhoods and commercial areas, I think it's completely consistent to say, if you're gonna have a cabaret, which is kind of above and beyond in its own animal in the GB district, that we can require additional things of a cabaret.
I don't know, they got it.
Because the average use in the GB district is not gonna be doing this to the residential neighborhood. They're gonna be closed at least now.
Except it goes back to the same problem, that the person was already, the owner was already using it for a purpose that was allowed. And now you are trying to retroactively regulate what they're doing.
Actually, this
Yeah,
cabaret thing is
license
new in
for
the
use.
space.
This is, it was not, it only started a couple months ago. It was never a cabaret before.
I think they're trying to get to the cabaret license.
They're still trying to get their license.
cabaret.
It
Still
was a
trying to
dance
get-
studio, but it was never had a cabaret before.
Okay, all right,
So
well,
I mean,
that,
that's an opportunity then to, right, work with the sound engineer, impose specific mitigation measures as a condition to improving any such use then. So there is an opportunity for the town to then address
Again,
some
I've
of
done
those.
NBC studios in Manhattan, with noise, and you cannot have the noise from those things. Even when they have a band come to play, the adjacent property, you hear zero. You hear zero. This can be done to this environment.
Maybe, Mark, we should go to, is there a public hearing on this?
I've been to one public hearing on it. The people never showed up.
Well,
then
they
how
have
do
to
they get
show
a
us in our letter,
Yeah,
or they won't get their license.
yeah.
But I think the main problem is that on their amplifiers, they go up to 11.
You go to sea level, yes. So let's
All right.
continue.
okay.
I'm just expressing my 2 cents.
Okay. So you might want to say something about enforcement in the report, I don't know. Or not, or not.
Well, I mean, that seems to be out of our purview.
Yeah, I agree.
Although, I mean, I guess the only thing is that if there's going to be a lapse in enforcement, then the board should reconsider how tight they want to make the penalties to make it more worthwhile for the police to act. I'm sure one of the reasons why the police doesn't bother acting, or would prefer not to bother acting, is if there's no real effect when they try to enforce it.
Well, as Kathy said, they don't enforce these chapters. They don't enforce the.
Unless there's a provision that would allow them to give hefty penalties sufficient to make them interested in doing that job, doing that particular function.
What do you think, please?
They would have to have the
Meters.
authority to enforce these chapters.
I think right now, the way they have it established, there is no set standard on how to enforce it, because John's not coming out with a meter at 3 o'clock in the morning, the police aren't going out there with a meter, so all they're doing is coming and saying, turn it down. They're not measuring it so that they can actually create a
But the
report.
police have a sound meter, right?
No.
They do.
They have, but
They do.
Have they ever used
they
it?
have never once used it. in
That's
15
an enforcement
times.
problem,
Right.
right? So why isn't the town board, somebody had mentioned this to the town board?
Yeah, no, they don't, town boards, you mean the enforcement end, how
Yeah.
this works? That I don't know.
So is there a reason why the police department has not been aware of?
Because it's not a crime, in their eyes, they're like, we have 4.
Bigger fish to
They're
fry.
busy.
And that's why the
Yeah.
town board,
That's
if
why
they
it's
make the
usually the code
penalties higher.
enforcement officer that does it.
We have better things to do, we'll get to you in an hour, they said.
Right, well, the penalty, if the town board jacks up the penalties, then it becomes.
And that's when I
more
called
effective.
Kim Jeffries up, and she called the police, and they came within 5 minutes. After they said they'll be there in an hour, when there's no crime going on.
If you want on the bus.
But we're under the bus, yeah, yes, no.
So maybe you need to go over and break a window, there'd be a crime, and they.
Yeah.
All right, maybe we're doing we've been in the meeting a little bit too long, let's
Yeah.
go off that side.
All right, tree protection chapter. This is a new concept, it's sort of a replacement of biomass. So at first, we have definition of tree bank and definition of tree bank fund. These come into play later, and when I read you the section on the bottom of page 19, I think you'll understand. This is when people take down trees. Bottom of page 19. The property owner shall replant or plant replacement trees of a similar native non-invasive species to offset the negative effects of the tree removal based upon an approved graphic plan. The applicant shall meet the minimum requirement of the replacement of 50% of the total aggregate diameter of trees removed with new trees in accordance with the plan for tree replacement. Tree replacement shall be required on-site unless the approving authority determines that because of site constraints, it is impractical or impossible to fully meet the mitigation requirements on site.
So so I go and I cut down 100 of my trees on my property. So I can only be penalized for 50 of those trees. I only have to plant 50 new ones. Is that what you're saying here?
Essentially.
So it's worth it for me to go and cut 100 of my trees down because I only have to plant 50 of them.
I mean, sometimes, these things become impractical, because you just do the math on, your 100 trees, but if you cut one 30-inch caliber tree, if I'm reading this right, Dave,
Yeah,
right, so that means I gotta replace 15 inches of caliber.
yes,
So that would mean if I cut one tree, I gotta put in 15
1-inch trees,
inch and a half trees, inch and a half caliber new trees.
15. How many did you take down in the first place?
I just took out one.
Oh, 1 30-inch tree.
Right.
So
So if you took down
15 inches, 15 to 1 inch caliper trees,
15 trees.
Or, yeah,
or 7.5.
or, yeah, when you do the
75
math, but if you take down one tree and you plant the tree so they can grow, you know, if you've got to cut down half a dozen trees, that really turns your property into a nursery.
Right, right. And there are two alternatives to that approved by the town board. One is to plant on town-owned property, if you can't fit all these trees on your property, because there's no room. And the other is to pay money into a tree bank fund based upon some amount that the town board approves. But this was more intended for a developer taking trees down in an approved way.
Is he allowed to put in basically saplings if he's gonna take down a mature tree to compensate? Even if there's a bunch of them?
That's an important point.
No,
Because you wouldn't be replacing it with 1-inch diameter trees.
no,
You would always have the option of replacing it with 6-inch diameter trees, making it a much fewer number. And so it wouldn't be a forest, but you would get the eventual biomass equivalency after,
I mean,
5 years of growth.
transplanting a 6-inch caliber tree is kind of a big tree.
So maybe a 4, yeah. I mean,
Four's pretty big too.
Four's pretty big, but I've done 4. It's like 400 pounds worth of root ball, but it can be done. And if you're a developer, they can manage that.
But I
But
guess my
historically,
point is,
developers
if you're doing a subdivision, and you're building a road, and you're cutting for houses, you start doing that inventory of trees, and you know, start tallying up the caliber, it gets to be a big number.
Oh, I was reading this only as trees that weren't supposed to be taken down.
So it's,
I didn't realize that we were,
I think it's all
And
trees.
does it distinguish? I thought it was for all trees.
without a tree.
This is,
No.
Dave, this is for any tree, right? I mean.
No, it can't be, because you're allowed to it's only, if your trees are being removed for permitted reasons, you don't have to replace it, right? I'm reading this correctly. If the tree is an invasive species, I can take it away without reference to the replacement tree.
no, I think the intention, and maybe this isn't drafted well enough, but the intention is that if you ask to take a tree down.
Any tree.
Yeah. I know this is
Okay.
different and unusual for the town of Austining, but I believe the town board wants to replace biomass, regardless of the reason the tree has come down.
Oh, I disagree with this.
Okay?
Well, I understand some of your concerns, but I like the idea of the tree bank, because then you can accomplish it without, burdening particular property with lots of small trees.
But I mean, it's a practical matter, think about it, say if the town had parkland, and, you had a subdivision where, you know, the caliper tally was 500 inches, say. Now, it wouldn't be hard to do, you could get up to 500 inches. So I need 250 inches, so I gotta plant them somewhere where they'll thrive. So what do you start doing, filling in your ball fields with
Yeah, no, I see
trees?
your point.
You know, if an area is already wooded, you know, the viability of the tree is planted it under a canopy, so you gotta find places to put them. I think it just presents some practical difficulties implementing, especially at that level of mitigation.
I like the intent, but I see.
Yeah,
the
no,
problem,
the
yeah.
intent is fine, yeah, it's just the implementation gets a little.
Or maybe there are some thresholds below which, it's a practical solution, but above which it becomes impractical.
Well,
And maybe someone could
there's a whole
identify
other
that threshold.
tangent you can go down on, forest management, you can go in and look at. No, but I mean, you go into, some places, the things ought to be thinned out a little bit, and maybe some newer trees can go in, and they have some,
Yeah, but I'm, basically, I don't agree that that can be the term intent, that all trees be placed this way. Because if that was the case, there would be no point in having a separate paragraph 3 opposed to 4, 5, 6, and 7. Or for that matter, 1 and 2. I mean, I understand the preference is to replace them, but it wouldn't make any sense if all trees were to be replaced, because then why would you separate it as a separate paragraph 3?
I mean, there are plenty of properties in the town where I don't feel like you penalize an owner for taking down a single tree.
There's another section, just to let you know, 18321, penalties for offenses. And there are dollar amount penalties. And then it says, in addition to any other penalty, the violator will be required to replace in kind each and every tree removed, cut down, or destroyed in violation of this chapter. If the tree was so large and mature that it cannot be replaced, the approval authority may require the planting of multiple trees instead. If the approval authority determines that there is not sufficient space on site for the planting of multiple trees, the approval authority may allow a portion of said trees to be planted on an alternate site such as on public property with the permission of the town board.
How does that differ from what I just said?
You're totally
Well,
right, because
This
looking at it.
is 1-for-1 in terms of mass.
That's fine,
Right, but this
if you're
is-
replacing it, as that, where you were not supposed to take down that big, nice big tree.
Right, but the town board wants to go beyond that.
Right, and I'm saying that that doesn't make any sense, because if you do that, you're removing the other paragraphs, that doesn't work. If that was the intent, then the town's doing it wrong. But it's a bad intent anyway, because if you do have a tree that's an invasive species, or it's endangers the health of the public or the
Or
property.
it's
you're putting on.
disease, you don't have to replace it.
Right, that would make no
From 4
sense.
through 7, right, you only have to, but this is just one of the grounds to take it down,
Yes.
is what you're saying. This is one of the grounds to take it down, that you could, if it's a perfectly healthy
Yes.
tree.
And it's a no good reason for taking it down, but you wanted to get rid of that tree, you've got to replace it.
Right.
If there was no other good reason for taking it down. I can see that.
And I think that's what this says, because you don't need to replace it if the tree is diseased, if the tree substantially interferes with permitted use, if the tree is an invasive species, you don't need to replace it in any of those circumstances. So this is really just covering the circumstance where I hate that tree.
So
And if you
it's
hate that
covering
tree-
my window, I just don't like that.
Right, you gotta do something else somewhere,
Right.
right?
It's
That's
usually
the-
more, I don't want it to fall on my house.
Right.
Yeah.
So
But if it's
That's a good
dangerous,
reason.
if
That's
it's
a good
dangerous,
reason.
you don't need to
That's
replace
Under
it.
5, you wouldn't have to replace it.
What's that?
Yeah, under 5, you wouldn't need to replace it, because then it would endanger the public, so there's no replacement in that circumstance.
Although, is that subjective enough or vague enough that
Well,
when
there's-
John comes out to the
There's some
site,
approving authority.
that he says, no?
The arborist.
Yeah, the arborist.
Yes.
Okay.
I think in your, to be perfectly honest, at this point in time, I'm not exactly sure what the town board intends. So I think you probably ought to state your position.
I was reading this almost as a penalty for someone that took down a tree without approval. And if that's the case, I can completely understand that.
Well, Well, that's in there already, 1-for-1, in terms of the biomass.
Right, but I think that there are some categories which automatically are approved, such as if the tree is an invasive species, if it's about to fall on your house.
But the 1-for-1 has always been problematic
It doesn't
because
say that, though. It says at the top of page 19, notwithstanding any other factors, the removal of a regulated tree may be favored if, so may be favored, but it's not automatic.
You still need approval to take down a dying tree.
Yeah.
It just says, notwithstanding the removal of the regular tree may be favored by the approval authority if, and then you look at, like, the 7, the tree is diseased or threatens the health. So you
So-
still need approval to take that
so-
tree down.
To try to put a fine point on this, is it your position that unless there's a violation, there should not be a replacement of the biomass or half of the biomass?
that's my position.
That's not my position. I like the intent of that, so I understand the problem that it would cause if it were broadly, uniformly filed. But another way that you could help alleviate that identified problem would be to expand the definition of the tree bank, so that if you were required to plant 10 smaller trees on your property, but really you could only comfortably fit 5, you would have to find a place essentially for another 5, and it could be, as is already mentioned, town property. But if you expand that so that there's a bank where other property owners could take those trees essentially. So
Within
other
the town of
property-
Boston.
Within the town of Boston. Anyone who wants a tree, there are 500, vouchers available for free trees, paid for by, this developer or that homeowner, and those vouchers would be there for the taking.
If you have a wooded property and you decide to take down a tree, and you have valid reasons to take down the tree, we're gonna make them get a voucher?
No, you don't have to replace under the code as it is. If it's diseased, if an arborist says it's diseased, or if it creates a hardship, there's no replacement
So
for those trees.
what's your scenario?
You're saying you have a wooded lot that you want to build a house on? Is that your scenario?
No, not build a house on, let's say you already have your house. You wanna take down a tree.
You want-
And it's
What's
first,
the sunlight in your backyard?
So then you would be allowed to do that if John Hamilton says
Yeah,
you
I
can.
So you're really expensive.
Is this sufficiently big, this,
but-
even if it's
But then you would
substantially
have to,
years?
but then you would have to replace it.
Or
Either on
give-
your
or
own
give
property,
money to the bank.
or give money to the bank.
Give money to the
your
bank.
property, it would be asinine to tell you to plant a tree if you took one down. How many damn trees do you have on your property?
that's
I
not-
have so many, yes, but I also have trees that have fallen down, or they're dead. So I have to replace them.
They're dead because of the number of damn trees that you have on your property.
I don't think that was.
But it's, like people, if somebody has a little bit of lawn, and wants to put a place that in for their kids,
Right.
they're not gonna take the rest of their lawn and put trees all over it because they had to take down one
That's,
tree.
that's the
But
point
the
I'm
other,
trying to make.
I get
there's
that
an
too.
environmental conundrum here too. You know what it is?
I mean, I'm
If
sure,
I wanted to put solar on my property, I may decide not to, because now I got all this baggage if I gotta cut the trees to get good solar exposure.
That's an issue.
I think
agree
the
with
bigger,
you,
I
yeah.
think you can attest to this, the bigger complaint that people probably have is the one-to-one replacement when they take down a tree without a permit, specifically the developers. If they take down a mature tree and we only ask them to replace it with the characteristics that we have in the zoning code, if I was a developer, I'd take them down in a
It's
heartbeat.
a no-brainer.
I think they wanted to.
So we need to clarify that, if that's their intent, that doesn't say that. If-
Yeah, I think the town board's intention was, any tree you take down for any purpose, you've got to replace 50% of the biomass.
That doesn't say that now.
Well, if that was the intent, it's a bad idea probably.
I agree.
Yeah, I think there should be a time limit to it. So I don't think it should be,
Fourth dimension.
yeah, 4th dimension would be fine too. I don't think you should necessarily have to replace 50% of the biomass instantly. You might say something like, you need to replant such that in 5 years, after 5 years of growth, you'll reach a certain amount of the original biomass. I think that's much more reasonable.
It's more reasonable, but I can see somebody trying, a bad person trying to gain that by
Right.
growing in fast-growing species versus what they just took down. I'm just, being devil's advocate here.
That's true, too.
I think
So you're not really gonna achieve what you're trying to achieve.
it's very onerous that if you have this huge
I agree.
tree on your property that's gorgeous, let's say, or a huge tree on your property that suddenly becomes sick and it's not dying and is diseased, to make the homeowner who's gonna have to incur the cost to take that tree down, which is not cheap,
Insignificant,
right? Because that's gonna, it's a safety issue to the house and to the
Right.
neighbors. And then, on top of that, pay for more trees. They didn't ask for that tree to die, they probably didn't want that tree to die, but.
So I agree
There's
with that.
there's a certain board member that I know that has a tree that she takes down. Because it needs to come down.
Thousands of dollars.
Her lot has a lot of trees on it.
I
So,
know.
wait,
Well,
let me
and then-
make one more
Yeah,
comment.
but-
People
Go on.
don't like to be charged for permit. So-
Why don't you say
Yeah.
it's onerous and practical
Wait a minute.
and
wait a
cost
minute.
prohibitive?
I would actually, after hearing these arguments and knowing how I would feel as a homeowner myself, agree with that as a homeowner. But the real problem is developers who come in and clear cut large areas, and that is different. So
And
it
the
should be,
one-to-one is not a resolution of
well, wait a minute.
them taking down a mature tree.
So maybe the law should be written separately for single-family properties versus properties or developments of a certain number of units and above. And it would avoid this clear-cutting issue that has plagued, suburban areas in general, and Ossining is no exception. But it would avoid this issue of homeowners, having, Big Brother look down on every move they make. So, I think like that.
Well, if someone's gonna clear cut or have an excessive number of trees, John would refer them to the planning board for a site plan, for a tree.
What happened on one that was in front of?
Well, if they
That
were
is
being
a
honest
non-citizen
and
portion.
coming and saying, I wanna take down all these trees.
So it
Not
would,
if they just did.
Right, which they did.
And we've had a few meetings where people said that developer that bought that property has cut down 5 trees.
That's who I'm referring to.
Yes.
And replacing it
And
with
replace it with
one-to-one
Yes.
with the standards that
Well,
we currently
they're in
have.
front of this
is
board, so.
Right,
the board can
but
require-
replacing it one-to-one with with small trees, it's not the equivalent. I think that's where the town board needs to focus there. Then,
so if it's an illegal takedown, it should be a one-to-one on a biomass basis. However they can achieve that.
Which it is.
That's the way it is with biomass. It's not a big tree versus a small tree. So it's not a one-to-one on a numerical basis, is that what you're saying?
Right,
It's currently one-to-one on a biomass basis?
yes.
Okay, that's
okay.
good.
So why do we need to change the rule? That already exists.
That already exists for violating the tree law, on taking down trees without a permit.
Okay.
But we want to extend it to protect, green areas and
So if someone wants to take down a tree and they don't have enough room on their property, they should contribute part of the money to this bank for other people in the town to use if they want to build a tree, if the town can't, if they can't find a piece of property to put it. This way we're keeping the greenery in our area at 100% equal footing.
Right, but what was raised was, you got a big tree that you need to take down. It's gonna cost you $3,000 to take the tree down. And then you're gonna spend another X thousand dollars on buying new trees.
And on top of that, you have to wait to get the permit before you can cut the tree down.
Dying or disease and poses a safety risk.
And you're gonna have to
Like
draw
the
a
town
plan
board.
showing where you're gonna plant the trees.
I know know it could be very
You're
expensive.
gonna hire
I
somebody.
know I've lost, and I don't know if any, I've lost, a bunch of, ash trees to that blight.
It's like thousands of dollars.
And then I lost, 5 of those trees, and that's what they make baseball bats out of. It's the best wood out there.
So you're gonna have to buy,
5 new trees, yeah.
no, 40 new trees.
40 new trees. Yeah.
Right.
So
And
be
2.5
careful what you're asking
And
for.
2.5 inch caliper to replace those.
We're gonna be bankrupt, yes. We will be bankrupt.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I don't think this works. This
Yeah,
doesn't work.
and you're faced with sort of, you know, when a subdivision comes before you, if you do a tree preservation, you know, do a tree inventory.
We can do that
And
specifically
then,
for that.
you know, it is, I mean, I guess I look at, there's a certain amount of tree removal that's almost implicit in the zoning. If you're gonna build a house and build a road to get there, you gotta take some trees down. So if you're going into a wooded piece of land and just doing, you know, if we're reviewing it and trying to minimize the disturbance, kind of cherry picking trees that maybe we can save that seem like they're worthwhile, you know, shift a road over or something to try and save a tree and move a house footprint. But if it's a wooded area, where's he gonna put this stuff? And I say, at some point, you know, that ends up being a big number. If we send them elsewhere, where is elsewhere to plant them?
I think it's a tough one. This doesn't work.
And then, of
It's
course,
gotta be
if
better.
the
That's
town
fine.
enforces it on
That's fine. So
itself,
how would
it
you like-
wants to build a
Do you
ball
want to
field,
characterize
forget
this
about it.
somehow? Owner is cost prohibitive?
I think
For
it's,
homeowners.
I think it's extremely onerous to the single
Yeah.
Single home.
Single home. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Even
we do something,
So it should be like developments of
that's not a lot, you know, sorry.
4 or more, you know, whatever reasonable threshold number.
Frankly, I don't even like the idea of locating it. If there's a development and they want replacement, it should be done on that site. We're replacing it on that site. We shouldn't be looking at,
But it gives them an option.
well, we run into the problem that Dan brought up.
But that can be gotten around if there are enough people in the pool who are allowed to draw from those vouchers.
Why would they want to draw?
A lot of people around who would like to plant a tree. I mean, Home Depot sells trees, someone's buying trees.
And if you wanted that,
Where are we gonna put
well,
it?
from pine or whatever it was, and
Wherever a homeowner
$500
wants to
tree,
put a
you get it
tree,
for free.
they can get it
Then if
for
it
free.
falls down.
But yeah,
Oh.
if you were an owner, you wouldn't want to put a tree on because that just creates your liability.
You have to go get permits.
I had a tree fall on my house. And now, every time, and it's an old neighborhood, old trees, big trees, huge trees. And now every time there's a real windstorm or northeaster, it scares me.
That's why I have insurance.
Well, that's not gonna help you if all the trees fall down on you at once. I mean, here's the problem. Let's say you want to say, oh, I'll take it from the tree man because I want a tree. But really, what that landowners are really doing is creating the liability subsequently for himself because now he can't get rid of that tree anymore.
But that's his choice.
That's true. But
He's
You're-
making an informed
you're-
decision with,
but you're
there's a pro and a
incentivizing it.
con, there's a
You're-
pro and a con to
that's true, but
planting a tree.
you're
and
incentivizing it. Is that something that you want to be incentivized? That's all. You're making it easier for
Yeah,
people.
we're trying, we are trying to incentivize.
Free tree.
We're trying to incentivize people. No.
No, I understand.
That's exactly right.
I
We
understand.
are trying to incentivize
Okay.
people to plant trees.
All right.
Because we want it to be as close to a zero net loss as possible, even though zero net loss is not possible.
Right.
You know, if there are mechanisms.
And at one
where-
point or other, half of this place was like farmland, so there was like no trees on it. But that's,
Right,
that's
yeah,
besides
this is
the
all
point.
secondary growth. This
This
is
is like, okay, I don't, they need to go back and work on this, if that's what they really intended.
Okay, it's a laudable goal. So, but there are these issues, it's a complex set of solutions that have to be found.
So there are these two different kinds of reports the town board is expecting. One that has subjects related to zoning map changes, and the other related to the text changes. So would you like draft reports written up?
part, I think we should probably, if they could change it, probably need all the sections dealing with the trees, so that we can see what they took out and what they kept in or whatever else.
You want the whole tree chapter?
But don't kill any trees while you're printing it out.
Can you provide them with the tree chapter? So I can't put it into the local law. And,
We all have our copies, right? We could bring our
yeah,
physical copies.
Is it, oh, there are tree laws in there, but the noise portion's not in our copy.
Oh, it's not?
Just not the noise portion.
Just
if a
email-
tree falls on the cabaret property,
No, just email him the link for the town code. He can,
Right, I can go look at
Okay.
it there. I can do it.
I'm never sure
No.
what is for doing.
and that's the end of the local law.
Okay. All right, thanks, folks. Next item is Schneider subdivision map.
Oh, I just wanted to.
Get my signature?
Page can be signed.
Okay, great. Adjournment for the Butler subdivision, fine. Minutes, do we have,
Did you get the easement from Gordon?
I read the meeting minutes, I had no, what was, I had no changes.
Yeah, the declaration, but there was an easement with the neighbor
Items,
that I was told was sent to the town, sent to the county to be recorded. That hasn't actually been recorded? They were not. So I would sign it and hold it. It's signed and hold it. I will, the tax receiver won't sign it. Okay. Until he signs it.
He is gonna sign it.
Right.
But don't,
But I will hold it before I bring it to the tax office.
I read that.
Yeah,
Just until I get the
But they were
Yeah.
also,
Right, we've got the easement on Schneider, there's that other easement on the neighbor in the resolution, so that technically has to, they represented to me that it's been done and sent to the county clerk for filing, but we don't actually have proof of filing yet. So, but they have represented that it was signed and sent to the title company to file. But that was a prerequisite to sign.
oh, so we don't have that documented yet?
Well, we have the representation that they've done it.
A representation, but we don't actually have the
So
document.
if
Okay,
you
we'll wait.
if you wanted to sign it, we can hold it back, just so you.
Okay, I can do
So you-
that, that's fine.
for
Hold in
information.
escrow. Okay.
Yeah, hold it.
You
rather hold it?
There's no backup for you as liaison for the EAC, is that correct?
Right?
That's,
We have-
that's right.
Okay, does anybody else feel like being a backup liaison to the EAC?
EAC. What does that involve?
Essentially, one meeting a month, Monday night, first Monday, and then, email exchanges.
I don't have one tonight.
It's pretty active group, which is to their credit. They do a lot of, good
They
analysis.
also have an open committee, which is not public. So you folks,
they won't let me. We'll let you better.
so, but if you folks know that you
But you
can
can
recommend
do
the,
that.
to the town alternative maps, bring that into point.
For,
I'm serious.
no, it's,
Yes.
no, it wasn't a CD, was it?
No, they handed them out tonight. I think you need to get,
Okay, that's got the
Not as much as-
and I think they're under.
Okay, if you can back the liaison?
Even if it's part of the property.
Okay, so you'll be a CC on everything those that are. Okay.
Is it James State?
But they're a good group. You're gonna do it, or?
All you do is just, if you're not gonna show up.
Yeah, it's just, I'm not sure. I think I've only missed two, like 5 years. It's not a big commitment.
Yeah, okay, there is also an issue in the resolution, as we all got the letter from the school district, right? And also the EAC would like to be
Well, you know, the other
involved
thing,
in decision making before.
Are we done? Are we done?